space for a latent, awakened higher self to come through. And I think there are some important implications of the material I'll talk about in the book. One is that one of the major effects it had on me was that it made me realise that in life we don't really have as much to fear as we believe. We're all afraid of certain things to a lesser or greater degree. Some of us are afraid of, probably most of us are afraid of death to some degree. We're afraid of losing certain things, which our well-being depends on, losing certain people, losing our success, losing our roles in society. We may be afraid of illness, afraid of old age, various other things. But writing Out of the Darkness taught me personally that there's really not much to be afraid of, even though these things have such a major negative impact in our lives. There's always a positive side to any kind of suffering. Any kind of turmoil and suffering makes a space open for us to develop. It opens us up to spiritual potentials. And funnily enough, the more severe the suffering, the greater the space is that opens up for spiritual potential. So it's usually the most intense suffering which has the greater potential and which brings the greatest transformation. So there's always a positive side to any negative experience. There's always a spiritual potential in every negative experience. But also the book taught me that enlightenment or awakening, or spiritual awakening, is sometimes seen as something a little esoteric, something which happens to monks who've been meditating for decades in the forests of India, hermits in Tibet or in the desert somewhere. It's sometimes seen as something quite esoteric which ordinary people don't have access to unless you're willing to meditate for 70 years. But in fact, enlightenment is quite a common experience. I was amazed at how easy I found it when I was writing the book to find examples of people who'd become awakened as a result of turmoil and trauma. And it was incredibly easy to find examples. Even my own circle of friends and acquaintances and colleagues, I found several examples. But what actually happened is that a lot of people underwent this experience but didn't understand it because they had no background in spirituality, they'd never read any spiritual books or practiced meditation. But they'd had some degree of suffering or turmoil in their lives, they'd undergone this shift. And it took them sometimes years, 2 or 3 years, to understand what happened to them. So they felt a sense of bliss and well-being without really understanding it, without knowing what happened. So I sometimes think that there are probably thousands of people all around us who've undergone this shift but haven't yet understood it. You know, they feel a sense of well-being at the same time as a sense of slight bemusement because they don't really understand it. So, you know, I think it's happening to ordinary people with no background in spirituality, people in ordinary professions. It's happening everywhere right at this moment. But I think perhaps the most significant thing for me about writing the book was that it made me realise that enlightenment, as well as being a very common experience which everybody has access to, it's actually something which is latent in all of us, I think. Because, as I mentioned before, the people I spoke to really only experienced transformation because their ego broke down and there was suddenly this open space for a latent higher self to emerge and fill. So I think this latent, this awakened or enlightened self is actually inside everybody as a potential. If you like, you could see it as the next level in human development. You know, in the same way that in some sense, every being in evolution has some higher forms of development existing inside as a potential. I think that's true of human beings, and the next level of our development is this enlightened, awakened self which exists inside all of us. So, since it exists as a potential in everybody, as our next level of development, it could conceivably be the normal, collective consciousness of every human being on the planet. So for me, it's made the idea that human beings can shift to a new level of evolution. It's made that idea much more conceivable and realistic, because the potential is there inside every single human being. Thank you.